Can you modify the probe signals, accounting for density and temperature and salinity factors?
I think I have it, sir.
What is buffer time? Is what buffer time?
Are you ready for the one with the whales? Because we are. Before we get into the voyage home, we're going to go around and introduce ourselves, Del. I'm Dustin from Best of Trek, Worst of Trek.
Hi, I'm a double dumbass. I'm also named Del.
Win, Grace.
All right, Dory.
And I'm a triple dumbass. I host a YouTube channel called I Love Bad Star Trek. My name's Vanessa.
Audible Chekhov. Rank. Admiral. Not your opinions no one cares about.
Well, with that, everybody has these great, funny names, so I guess I'll start off with the question, does the humor in this movie work? Oh, actually, before we start that, I as this movie was, I would like to dedicate this episode of Buffer Time to the crew of the USS, or is it the USS? The Challenger
It was just called
and
Challenger.
the Columbia.
Yeah.
And now, after that moment of somber, let's get into something funny. Does the humor in this movie work?
I think it's the reason I love this movie. I think, like I said before we started recording, the one thing I miss the most about modern Star Trek is we don't have time for these side adventures that are more character driven than plot driven. We have to get through all that plot in 10 episodes so that we never get a chance to breathe. I think that's the reason I like Strange New Worlds so much, is that it is reaching out and trying to bust out of that. We're just going to shove plot down your throat for 10 episodes. I think this is why it's on my top 5 favorite movies, not Star Trek movies, but movies of all time.
I think that, outside of maybe a couple of things that have aged slightly poorly, I think the humor definitely still works and is one of the saving graces of this movie. Not that it needs a saving grace, but
I think the humor is where Star Trek finds its heart. And that's what I think, like piggybacking off of what Del said, is missing largely from a lot of modern Trek. So it is like really a nostalgia hit and just like a landing pad to just be able to sort of relax and have a giggle with this crew that has, become so beloved.
Yeah, I mean, Trek is really, really hit or miss with its comedy. And this is one where I think almost all of it hits. I was thinking when we started this, now I've lost the train of thought of, there was one that I one bit of humor that I'm like, no, that doesn't work at all. But most of it really does. So on a whole, it's one of Trek's funniest things that it's legitimately tried to be funny at.
On my last rewatch, it really stood out to me that Scotty complains that reading Klingon is hard, considering he's played by Walter Koenig. That was just really funny to me this time.
Because like a lot of Trek is sort of like they're so urgently pursuing like saving the planet, the universe, the galaxy, whatever. But it's like, what is worth saving if all we're doing is just moving ahead to the next thing? Like, there's, the guns and butter ratio is off.
Guns and butter, I've never heard that before. Also, how can you...
Dustin, you're muted. Sorry, Del.
That's all right.
Dustin.
How can you
Go ahead,
hate a
Del.
movie that has a time warp in it? He actually asks for the time warp.
Again?
Yes.
What I was trying to say is, I think the only other thing that comes close for me, as comedy in Trek, is the trouble with Tribbles and Tribbles in general. Like the trouble with Edward. That's an amazing little short. I love it.
Oh yeah.
Not the very short treks.
Yeah, but some of this stuff.
Not a fan of those.
You were not here when we were reviewing them. I was.
I was going to say what Norman was
Hello.
going to say, which was, Dell mentioned time warp, just the jump to the left.
It just ties everything together. Can I ask a question?
Go.
A silly question. How come the
course.
NX-01 could synthesize clothing so they could fit into different alien cultures and time periods, but these guys are wearing their fucking uniforms and just removing their insignia, and that's all they have to do? I mean, Spock is walking around. No one uses the word monk. That's the only thing I could think of if I saw a man in a terry bathrobe trying to be serious would be monk, and no one even goes there.
They're all taking too much LDS.
Yeah, half of them aren't in uniform though.
That's true, but like it's just weird. But Sulu does rock a leather half cape, and that is the gayest thing in this movie, I have to say.
It was
I don't know,
it was from the
Vulcan's
last
hats
movie.
with the Vulcan crew that's working on the Klingon ship. Their hats, that's something. That's a choice.
All those Vulcan hats. Oh my god.
I
It's
love
like
the
the
Vulcan
elves
hats.
in Christmas Story.
Well, that's one of the things I actually appreciate about this movie. I mean, I know it was before a lot of the other tropes, but they didn't take it so seriously as far as like preserving the timeline and stuff. So they're wearing whatever clothes, they're throwing bandanas on, they're giving away formulas to new technology, they're healing people with magic pills. It's just, whatever they got to do to fix their problem.
She grew a kidney. Grew a
There's
whole
one thing about
kidney.
that. Yep, that too. But there is one thing that scene with Scotty and McCoy, giving that guy the transparent aluminum. If you read the novelization, when that scene starts and they meet that guy, first of all, he's got an entirely different name, and then Scotty is fanboying out like crazy because, as far as he knows, this is the guy that invented transparent aluminum.
Oh,
So the novel actually makes it sound better and sets up a bootstrap paradox.
neat. I didn't know that.
My favorite part about most things is when she grew a kidney.
It was funny. Just very, very short personal story. My mom had kidney failure at the time this movie came out, and my mom was just like, hell yeah, when she saw that in the theater.
Someday we can just grow new kidneys at will.
Yeah, like that.
Hey, we
that
can do livers already.
that always gets me right in the feels when McCoy is going through the hospital and is like looking at the different surgical procedures as just barbarism. And, besides this sort of like disconnected ways in which surgical procedures were discussed in the elevator, where he was like, wow, you really think that? Like that just always gets me choked up.
How does Leonard Rosenman's score compare to the movies that have come before it?
I think he knew that this was going to be a more whimsical movie, because I really do, especially the opening music sounded a lot less epic to me. It sounded a little bit more whimsical.
Mm-hmm.
Was he the guy that sung the punk song?
No, the Kurt Thatcher that's with the boombox in that scene. He did that song. He wrote it. He told Leonard Nimoy they were gonna do like a I can't remember what new wave '80s thing was originally in the script, whether it was like Depeche Mode or
It was something totally not congruent to the scene.
it wasn't punk at all. It was very early '80s new wave, and it was pretty funny whatever it was.
Oh my god!
And then Kirk Thatcher was like, "I'll write you a song for free that you can use," and he did. He wrote everything except the guitars, which I don't think it was Rosenman that did the guitars, but somebody in like the mixing booth that like played guitar just threw a random quick guitar line in there, and that was that.
But like whatever it was it still going to be him like as a punk listening to it? Because a guy that looks like that on that bus playing like Oingo Boingo would have looked ridiculous.
Hey, I like Oingo Boingo, and I kind of look like you.
Right. It just doesn't quite have the
No.
edge that would, go with his outfit. It's all about aesthetic. What strikes me about punkin movies always I find it very amusing.
I have an answer to Nadia's question. The whale song was actually Leonard Nimoy making random noises into a microphone, blended with actual whale song in order to make it sound slightly more alien. So that is actually Leonard Nimoy making fake whale songs, and he also makes the wah 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 noise.
I was gonna say he does the probe, but I thought the whale song was a real whale song.
No, it's mixed with Leonard as well.
Okay, that one I didn't know. I knew about him just and he like came up with the basis of that. Sound design is so much fun. You take like 4 things, throw a crap load of effects on them, and you can make something really fun. For me, I think this is actually it's either my favorite or it's right after Wrath of Khan for the first 4. For a one and done Trek music director, Rosenman hit this one out of the park because it's like so fun. It's whimsical. It takes you on a journey. It's not the seriousness of space that the other soundtracks really lend themselves to. What do you think of Spock's question? Oh, go ahead, Vanessa.
Oh, I was just gonna say, does Spock go on cruises in Alaska and sing to the whales from the cruise ship or something? Like, does he utilize that talent in the wild, or or did he?
No, but really the Shatner goes and does some spoken word for them.
Okay, Shatner reacting to Spock in the whale tank. That is Shatner at full speed when he's like the whole time. It's like that is peak Shatner to me.
Oh my. Just Spock. Spock, no.
Good. Maybe he's singing to that man.
Yes.
Well, speaking of Spock, what do you think of the questionnaire that the Vulcan computer gives him at the beginning?
I'm glad I never went to school on Vulcan.
I think it proves that the new Spock is more focused on gaining his intellect and his knowledge rather than dealing with any sort of emotions about being dead and coming back to life. That's what it felt like to me.
I think of Spock as somebody who uses his Vulcanness or leans into his Vulcanness as a defense mechanism from dealing with any emotions. Because it's like, oh, I have the option of opting out. Like, he really fetishizes this idea of complete repression, which he can never achieve, but he'll like kind of default to that when the time calls for it.
The only thing I'll say about it is I like that they call back to it in Enterprise's 4th season when Archer and T'Pol take their little walk through the desert.
I also I forget where it was, but I know they brought back the punk on the bus in something. Was it Strange New Worlds?
Picard.
Picard's
oh, it was Picard. Yeah. I couldn't
Picard.
remember where I'd seen it before.
He moved to Los Angeles.
And slightly updated the song.
Yeah, it wasn't quite the same, but it was very similar.
It was very similar. And Seven was the one who was like, hey, could you turn it off?
Okay, that makes sense then.
But he had PTSD because as soon as
he was like, yes.
Oh, never mind.
The one thing I learned doing my research for this particular watch through was that this was inspired by Leonard Nimoy being on a bus and being so annoyed by somebody. He's like, man, I wish I was a Vulcan and I could just nerve pinch this guy.
It's a good life skill.
Yeah.
Aside from the computer learning thing, I did like how it provided a way for Spock's mother to come back into the story. That was a nice touch, considering we'd seen Sarek already, but
Yeah.
not the human part of the equation yet.
Yeah.
It was a good time to see Amanda.
Seems only fair. Her son just died and then got his soul back. She should probably be around.
You'd think.
Yeah.
So now that he's clear, go ahead.
No, you.
Now that he's clear of Spock's Katra, is Bones again Kirk's conscience in this movie, as I've brought up in the first two? In 3, he was Spock, so he didn't really seem like Kirk's conscience, but that seems to be a thing.
I think it's a blend of Kirk's impulsiveness and Spock's reservedness that kind of creates that relationship. Although then every once in a while, Spock just throws everything to the wind and follows Jim's lead. Especially in this movie.
He's
I don't-
definitely
I
the
don't-
conscience that gets ignored.
Yeah.
Because like he keeps, especially in the beginning, like, oh, you're not going to time travel,
Yeah.
are you? You don't believe that we're going to do this like this, are you? And then Kirk just goes and does his own thing. Like, yep, that's exactly what we're going to do.
Because otherwise, like, he needs that sort of foil in Bones occasionally. Because otherwise, it's just Kirk giving orders and they just do the thing without any pushback or any critique on his methods. Because that's, to me, what Dr. McCoy really is just like that voice of reason. Like, are you sure about that? You know, like, and everybody needs that.
I caught something this rewatch that I've never seen before. When Kirk is handing out the money in San Francisco, Bones asks for seconds. He puts his hand out again. And because he starts to walk away, he turns around, he comes back, and he puts out his hand again. I'm like, that is so Bones right there.
Nice catch.
Yeah, it was just a little tiny thing.
Like, I need a tip for all the advice I've been getting.
He knows where to get some good whiskey.
Well, it was he was the one that got the glasses and gave them to Kirk. That
Yeah, I guess that
got
makes
traded
sense
in.
then.
So he's probably like, yeah, you know, if you're gonna sell those, you're gonna cut me back in, right?
It was cute.
So on a much more serious note, are we as humans the villains in this movie?
Yes. Well, I don't know about villains, but we're definitely short-sighted.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure that's really changed, but yeah.
I think taking the time period in question is important. At the time, saving the whales was a very big, like, nationally known thing. People had bumper stickers that said "Save the Whales." It was a very hippie thing. Greenpeace in the late 70s got very involved in trying to save humpback whales in particular. And then in, you're going to ask me to remember a number. I think it was 78. Paul Watson, who had been a member of Greenpeace and had worked on all of these whale projects, split away because they weren't willing to take direct action. And so now, if you've ever seen the television show Whale Wars, you know who I'm talking about, because that's Paul Watson. Yeah, there is rumors that Paul Watson actually was involved in somehow with the movie, but I don't believe it because he's too much of an ego maniac. But so it was in the public consciousness at the time, like people were aware about whale hunting and what it was doing, but it was really racist as well, because there was lots of blame on certain ethnicities in certain countries that weren't American. So there was a little bit of that going on too. Yeah.
Thank God we've gotten over that.
Yeah, no, exactly.
I think, like, I don't know if it's like the collective we, but the powers that be that commodified things like whales and commodify natural resources to the point of either extinction or decimation of an ecosystem, that would be the villain, you know? Like I remember like as a kid seeing like Captain Planet, you know, it's like, this is like Fern Gully, the same kind of thing. And it's always a company or a series of companies that is on the other end of the problem.
We're gonna take pollution down to zero.
There's some good Trek connections in that show.
Are there, Grace?
Who besides Guinan, or who besides
LeVar
Whoopi
Burton
Goldberg?
was one of
Oh,
them.
that's right.
And Gaia was her name, or Mother Earth.
Yep.
Whatever.
Neat.
Yeah, wow, she's into the G names in the early 90s.
Yeah.
Probably a guest voice or two as well. There are a lot of guest voices on there that are popular actors. Anyway, we're talking about something with whales.
Yeah, I know. Can I say another thing about the whole whale thing?
Of course.
Sure.
So Greenpeace and other whale conservatories got like outraged when they saw this movie because they thought they were disturbing whales in the wild. But in fact, they were animatronics that were only 4 feet long. The only shot of real whales was when they were swimming away in the ocean. That's the only real whales in the whole movie. And yet they were like protesting and going to the press and being like, "This is not cool. You can't do this to whales." And then the studio was just like,
Nope.
Come
they
look.
spent one of their 21. This only cost $21 million, which I mean was a lot for the 80s, but also not that much, especially today. And to spend 1 million of it on animatronic whales, that's huge.
They also had to give Nimoy and Shatner a raise because Shatner wasn't going to do it unless he got a raise. There's a lot more to it, but that's what I'll say now.
Speaking of budget, do you happen to know, did they get any product placement money for this one? Because there were a few things I spotted, especially like the Michelob and whatever.
Yellow Pages.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I haven't found a distinct answer to that.
Okay. It seems
But
like
I have wondered that myself. I've seen how, and I can't remember how, like, I don't know if he like did ads for them or something, but I the only thing I've ever seen was something about how George Takei was connected with the Yellow Pages, and like, so when there's that like Yellow Page ad in the background and he walks by it, there's something there, and I don't remember what
they
it
did
is.
linger on it quite extensively.
Yeah, the only other one I remember right off the bat is that there's, real quick if you miss it, on one of the buses going by Canon cameras, because when I was looking for images of things of Canon in Star Trek to discuss Canon, I was like, okay, and I went looking for stuff and I found that there was a Canon camera ad. Like, okay, that'll make my point.
I just love how so much of the technology or product placement there is just entirely obsolete. I know that's obvious, but
Some of it. I mean, the Yellow Page, yeah, they've transformed into something else. They've transformed into Internet Archives, but Canon cameras, like, that for their good high-end stuff hasn't changed a lot. It's just gone digital. But even film cameras aren't like completely obsolete. I'm trying to remember what else was in there.
Maybe some of the computers, but I don't really remember.
I didn't catch. They looked like early IBMs, but I wouldn't swear.
Yeah, the one in
that.
Plexicorp was definitely an Apple. Or at least the operating system was an Apple.
Maybe a Chewy. I don't know.
All right. When Kirk said, that's what that was to Scotty, saying he had a sour stomach, was that implying that Scotty's been blowing up the bathroom?
There are no bathrooms on the Enterprise. There's only one.
No, they were on the Klingon ship,
Oh, the Klingon ship. That's
Klingon
right.
ship.
Okay.
and
I was-
it's like
Have bathrooms?
those are known for being like less than cushy. Even uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
He's back.
I figured they just probably
Boy,
had
don't
a
I love Streamlabs.
Could have worse. Usually when that happens, it's all of us.
They don't have any
Yeah.
Febreze or matches or nothing.
Just the 3 shells.
just something made out of crushed bloodworms, I'm sure.
All they've got is 3 shells, and they have to figure it out.
He doesn't know how
Sorry.
to use the 3 seashells.
So much research went into figuring out how those 3 shells work. Anyway,
A squatty potty.
Do you not know what a squatty potty is?
Yes.
Okay.
But I'm picturing
Oh,
Klingons
wow.
using one now.
Boy, this is so much
Hi,
fun.
Dustin.
See, we did a slingshot around the sun, and we picked up some chronotons, and now we're here, and this is what's happening.
Well, we only used our best guess.
Your guess is better than most man's facts.
This is what happens when you use Miles O'Brien to do your time travel calculations and not Spock. You get like almost there, but everybody's got to suffer because of Miles, and that's
Spock can
where
do the
we're
math
at
in
in
his
Bubble
head,
Time right
but
now.
Miles is like got a golf pencil and a memo pad and is doing arithmetic, while Spock's like, "Oh, it's this answer."
How does Kirk, of all people, not catch on to colorful metaphors better?
Double damn ass on you.
I mean, we know he could have recited the Constitution if he
He grew up in Iowa. Nobody curses in Iowa in the
was a
23rd century. No one kicks their car and says "fuck." Like, honestly.
I do like to see. It's like none of them had ever been on like a landing party before.
Yeah.
None of them knew how to interact with other people either. They're like, oh, they just all forgot their training over the last 20 years.
Nice catch. That begs the question of itself. When does the term landing party become away team? Is it not till TNG?
I think so.
It's
I'm trying to
somewhere in
remember.
here. And I mean, this isn't truly an away mission. It's just them doing their own thing. But that's a good question.
Probably someone's going to explain it in a prequel series. It was Picard who coined it on the Stargazer or something.
Of course.
They got it from Future Guy.
Ah.
They were like, "It's away teams."
And Cisco popped in when he was working for the Prophets, but
Yeah.
he met Picard before Picard knew who he was. So it's a whole thing.
Fucking chronotons, man. Fucking chronotons.
I broke canon and the stream. I'm sorry.
We're having so much fun here. This is all because of time shenanigans.
So
Um,
I have a question. How
Yeah.
come that they have all quote unquote known languages, and yet like they have no dead ones, they have no animal calls, they have no I would consider that to be a language. Even now, like with the technology knowing that we can't translate it, doesn't mean it's not a language. So
Well,
from the beginning, I'm having like this technology thing where I'm just like, what do they just go? Oh, it's been extinct for a while. Delete. Like, can they still speak Latin? Like, it seems weird to me.
How does Hoshi translate aquatics, but Uhura and them can't translate whale songs?
Right.
Hoshi, I guess, as a character doesn't exist yet, but
True.
I mean, I guess they would have to actually have a conversation to work from, and all they really have was just recordings, and they don't have a starting point for it.
It just seemed weird to me.
Could have
And
at least
then
translated
Spock, but
from
we did
both
get
of
that
those.
cool comment from Spock, and I don't remember what it is. Like, it's the height of hubris to assume humans are the only intelligent species on Earth. It's like, this is the first time we're thinking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found that to be really poignant in this particular watch through.
How does Spock know enough about whales by the time he jumps in there that it's not going to just eat him alive? Because he's like already in there before Kirk can even consider. Where'd Spock go?
He's the science officer. He
Well,
was the one that came up with the idea that it was whales, and he's on a hunch like, oh, hey, I gotta go test my theory. I think this is the sound of whales from Earth. If he knew that much, to figure it out from that weird womp, 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 womp whale call, I think he could figure that out.
You guys know how you had an animal that lived on your planet a couple hundred years ago? I think it's that.
And like right before that, Julian is actually talking about how whales eat. How they like just like strain plankton through their. I almost said teeth through their
Baleen, right?
baleen.
Baleen.
Yeah. It's kind of like they realize that they're like, oh, we better explain this really quick before a full-sized human jumps in and possibly gets eaten by a whale.
At least we got Leonard Nimoy in his undies.
Ooh. So I'm
I think
going
that
to
was part of the
completely
contract.
modify one of these questions I have and make it way too long and super political. Does Chekhov not immediately getting arrested in Ronald Reagan's America for asking for the location of nuclear vessels to a cop equate to a Muslim green card holder asking a cop to arrest Bibi Netanyahu today?
Or even just a pro-Palestinian protester?
Or someone that says, I'm not a fan of Trump.
That's coming next.
Yeah.
First, they came for the Muslims. Then they came for the trans kids.
So to
That's all it took.
piggyback on that, though, was that cop
shit.
actually an actor, or was he just a real one they walked up to?
I have no idea.
Because I had heard
That-
they just walked up to a real cop.
That's exactly what happened. It was one of the cops that was there to help cordon off the street for this shoot.
Ah, okay. That makes sense.
And the woman that walks by and asks
But it's something
Chekhov,
different.
or when they Chekhov's,
Alameda,
he's
yeah.
yeah, Chekhov's just asking the universe. It's a rhetorical question. Nobody's supposed to answer. She was just an extra who, of all things, like she had parked her car on that street and got towed because of the filming. And they offered her a part so that she could pay the towing bill. Like, man, it's kind of dickish. But then, like, she wasn't supposed to answer, but she did, and then that was the shot that made the cut.
So extras like to do that sort of thing because you can register for SAG as something called an under 5 because you have to have SAG experience in order to join SAG. And an under 5 means that you've been in a production with less than 5 lines, but more than 1. So as long as she nods or says yes after she makes a statement, SAG card.
Uh-huh.
It's a thing extras
It
try
was
to
a
do
good
all the
interaction.
time.
I mean, it allowed a little bit of improv from Walter, I guess. But,
Yeah.
so I guess it was useful.
But I don't think it would even be the police that would arrest him. I think like half an hour later, the FBI would show up and just disappear him. But I have
It
a
also
bigger
seems to be
question.
where we are. Yeah.
How did Chekhov and Uhura get to Alameda? The next shot is they're crawling up the shore like they swam. Except they're dry.
Well,
How did they get there? Why are they on the rocky beach? I don't understand.
There was a whole scene they took a paddle boat, but they cut it for time.
Yeah, see, their bus had just a person with classical music playing too loud, and Chekhov got really into it and had a whole philosophical debate about whether Russian or American composers were the best, and it had to be cut for time.
Well, it was all
Yeah.
Tchaikovsky.
I just was, again, like, I think I've thought about this before, but yeah, the next establishing shot, they're on this rocky shore, and I'm like,
Mhm.
how did they get there?
Set phasers to plot convenience.
Yes.
Well, I know they cut out the entirety of Sulu's subplot, so who knows what else they lost.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we at the same time, like, we kind of find out more about Sulu through this than any time before it. Like, at least we hear about like him at the academy, and he's a big flyboy, and because I mean, at least, I mean, we get to see Ortegas actually be a badass behind the helm, and like, but all her best line is she pilots the ship.
Ugh.
Meanwhile, like Sulu, you never actually see him doing any like daring maneuvers. At least until this, kind of. He does a lot in the Bird of Prey, and like, I guess he knows helicopters, because why not?
It's
Again,
that one.
where did he get the helicopter? Did I just miss that? Or did someone just walk by and say, "Oh, you need to deliver that? Borrow my helicopter."
Well, he
Yeah, he did just kind of walk up to a
guy.
dude with a helicopter.
Kind of.
Okay, I missed
Then
that
he just
part
had it.
because I was just like, why did
It's San Francisco, Dale. You can't throw a rock without
Yeah.
hitting a few choppers.
They don't explicitly tell you, but you have to assume that he got it from the dude that he talks to with it. So who
Yeah.
knows?
It's
I
where to
understand-
the chopper.
There were supposed to be several more scenes about his story, but they just didn't
Yeah.
have time. Because of course Sulu's going to get cut out of any of the other cast, I guess.
Why does Scotty immediately assume that they're rounding up humpback people in a tank?
That was a little speciesist. Although to be fair, again,
I
humpback
like-
whales are extinct, so
I liked the mental image of a bunch of like dowager humped people like swimming around in a big tank. I don't know why.
Says something about his upbringing, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
oh wait, this ticker doesn't work. No, it doesn't work because San Francisco is a sanctuary city.
All right then.
Thank you. Good night.
nice.
So as we're talking about
It's
stupid
ludicrous.
jokes, let me see if I can actually bring a picture back up without the stream going to shit again. How many pigeons does Jillian run over while
Oh.
she's just slow rolling talking to Kirk? Over or under 6.5?
Poisoning pigeons in the park.
Oh wow.
Well, I also have a question. How did nobody else run into the Klingon ship in the park because it was invisible? Like, is she the first person to, like, is someone jogging across the park and just run into it?
There's a deleted scene where
Oh, is there?
they cut where a woman runs into it randomly.
Oh, damn. Oh, well.
Yeah, it sinks like this far into the ground.
Yeah, I
Nobody
know.
Notice this.
Crushes a garbage can.
Yeah.
There's like a little league game. All the
Some dogs peeing on it.
The ball keeps bouncing off of it, and they're like, "Ugh! It's not a foul ball after all."
Someone's playing frisbee, it just gets stuck on the top. It's floating up at 20 feet.
Is Starfleet demoting Kirk just threatening him with a good time?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's not a punishment.
You can see the
None of this
glee in
was a
his
punishment.
eyes when they say it.
You disobeyed a direct order, so we're going to make you a captain again, which is what you clearly really want, and we're going to give you the flagship,
Yeah.
a brand new flagship. Now
They
go think
should
about
have
it.
like seen the smile form on his face and go, you know what? Maybe we were making a mistake.
Yeah.
But you know, can't say no to that smile, that damn smile.
But
Remember when we told you your ship sucked one movie ago and we were going to get rid of it? Well, we built another exact copy, so have at it.
Fair.
Yeah, but this one doesn't have as much maintenance to do on the pipes that go nowhere and do nothing.
So it must be Wednesday.
Not until the next movie where nothing
yesterday.
works.
Yeah, it won't be installed. It won't be fixed till Tuesday. Yeah, like one of you guys pointed up last week. I hadn't really thought about it, but they make the point to be like, "Oh, Kirk, you'll never sit in the captain's chair again if you could do this." Like, he shouldn't be sitting in the captain's chair anyway. He's an admiral.
Right.
He's an admiral.
For all intents and purposes, not really.
Yeah, like Picard, I guess he took Kirk's words to heart from Generations because he never really seemed to make a great admiral.
Is that why all the admirals suck? Because they just want to stay captains and they're just bitter.
I'm just wondering what he's going to do with all those weapons in his office now that he's captain, or they're just going to like ship it UPS. Like, here's all your knives and your nunchucks and your guns on a starship.
There's probably some
Nope,
pre-war
that's
planets
fine.
that have a Cold
They
War
FedExed
thing
it
going
up.
to the Klingons he can give them to.
FedEx has like a little square shuttlecraft to do like interstellar deliveries, and it goes warp 9, so that way they can do overnights. I don't know why I'm switching gears to go to warp 9, but you know.
Do you think this movie inspired
Every Star
Cetacean
Trek has a good
Ops?
plot.
Yes, absolutely.
I think so.
I wonder if
wonder
they
if-
do they mention
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
do they mention the whale scientist in Cetacean Ops at all in Lower Decks? Because like Cetacean Ops just
No, they should
gets
have.
mentioned by name in TNG.
In Prodigy, sort of, kind of. Because the whale
Hmm.
that's Cetacean Ops in Prodigy is named Jillian, but
Oh,
they don't specifically say after so-and-so.
right.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it till this watch through, but it made me wonder, like,
Right.
is she responsible for creating the first Cetacean Ops?
I also really liked that this was not a girl that Kirk took back to his quarters and then convinced her to do what he wanted. That this was still like a
Mhm.
platonic relationship at this point. And in my headcanon, it stays that way. Like it makes because they immediately separate to go to different ships. But
Well, he tried briefly. He's like, wait, you're leaving? She's like, yup. See ya.
Even though they did briefly have a date here, which here's another fun fact, which I don't understand at all. So this is a real restaurant that they shot this in, but they wanted to have
course.
pizzas. It wasn't this. They didn't have a pizza oven, so the production spent $100,000 to buy this restaurant a pizza oven. Like, why not just shoot it somewhere else that has a pizza oven?
or just get a pizza from like down the street and have the waiter bring it in.
But you got to see it being made in the back and put into the oven. That's important.
Then you insert a shot of a different pizza shop that has a fucking
Yeah.
oven. I have made films for no money. I know how to do this shit.
You could have
Yeah,
integrated it and
there's
had the
a
noise
thousand
show.
things they could have done to save some money on this one. I don't understand spending $100,000 just to use a
That's like
specific location.
because of the smaller budget, that's like a sizable percentage of
Yeah.
their budget is on a pizza oven that you don't even see. Like, what?
At the
You
restaurant,
could
I
have
got to
taken a
keep that in the
still
aftermath.
picture of a pizza and just throw it in there for 1 minute, and that would have been okay.
If the place is still there now, I want to go.
Get some pizza.
I do like the scene as, you know, a representation of how little they care about messing up the timeline, because this is the point where, you know, she asks Kirk what's going on. He just goes to rope like, fine, I'll tell you the truth. I'm from the future and we need whales. We need your whales.
We're going to
Give me your
repopulate a
whales.
species with your whales. And my friend Spock.
Hey, baby, how'd you like to help repopulate a species?
This is like typical Tinder first date type of shit. Where they just come out with most out of pocket backstory. Like, I don't know.
Jillian, swipe right, swipe right, swipe right.
I wanted to mention at some point, this seems like a good point to do it. I love this movie because they fuck with Shatner's hair. Like he gets caught in a windstorm and it's like all over the place. Sometimes it's like this high and sometimes it's not so high. I love when he goes in the ocean and it's kind of like floating around him. Like they just were like, we're going to fuck with your hair. You don't get to have like the nice Shirley coif that you normally do.
I love Norman's idea of like incorporating Riker's pizza oven into.
found this pizza oven in $23.99 you can use.
I love a bunny corn pizza.
Yeah, how do you know it's not the same pizza oven? Well, actually, we do because this is an electric, and that was a stove
Like a
made,
pizza
but-
temporal
Yeah.
prime directive.
Oh.
Nice.
Do you
Pizza
think
is
Jillian's
eternal.
character would have worked better if it was Eddie Murphy?
Oh yeah, that's a whole thing. Because
Yeah.
I mean, Jillian became 3 other characters rolled into one from the original script. So,
Oh.
yeah,
I
there was
think-
one role written for Eddie Murphy. There's one where there's a reporter named Jillian, and I can't remember what the third role is. But I remember there's 3 roles that ended up getting rolled into Jillian Taylor.
I think it's kind of the idea they went back to in Future's End and Voyager with the whole Rain and whoever else was in there.
Google has no idea.
All right.
So, given what we see in the hospital, how would McCoy react to coming back during the pandemic?
Oh,
He would
Okay.
have a torch in one hand and a pitchfork in the other. Like Vanessa, I respect what you said, but that whole thing in the hospital where he's just so upset at how
Oh, this is
medieval
the-
everything is. Every time I watch that, I'm just like, dude, do you not understand that medicine had to progress to get to where it is in the 23rd century? You're 400 years in the past. You're not going to be able to, like he did, repair an artery directly. Sorry, we have to cut into people's heads. We're just not there yet.
I did actually think of that briefly because when they were pointing out that none of them were wearing masks, the people from the future.
Oh.
Now, maybe that's just because they're used to having biofilters or whatever, but I would think that he especially would have thought of that.
That is
I
a good
think-
point.
I was referring mostly to the lack of humanity with regard to how doctors treat patients. Like
That is-
that's
Oh,
the
okay.
element that is
Yeah.
missing. Like McCoy has a rapport with his patients that takes into account their humanity, even though he can be brash and you better take this pill kind of person. Like it's done with love, and these doctors just sort of talking about like chopping people up like it's nothing. It's just gross to him.
Mhm. I didn't even think of that. Yeah, she was just kind of in the hall too. Like she wasn't even in a room. She was
Yeah.
chilling in a hall as he walked by. That's got to be pretty
Been there.
barbaric to him too.
I think it would just be like, it would be very akin to me. Like a lot of the characters on Star Trek are shown to be not very good historians or don't have like a lot of historical context. So I think McCoy would have a similar shock to the system, seeing how the pandemic was handled and mismanaged.
My brain would say that he would lead a revolution against our government for saying that ivermectin and injecting bleach were going to solve the problem. That's my headcanon.
He's going to beam into the White House press room with a phaser. Where's Trump?
Bro, I got 2 words for you. Horse dewormer.
He
Yeah.
gave me a gummy bear and I got over COVID. I mean, we use them for vitamins now, right? So why wouldn't medicine in the future be in the form of a gummy?
And edibles.
Yeah.
All right. I only have one more regular question. Entertainment wise, how did the whales conversation with the probe compare with the 11 minutes of Wookiee discussion at the beginning of the Star Wars holiday special?
Way, way better.
That was
I didn't need the whale song translated, but for fuck's sake, translate the Wookiee. If you're going to go on for that long, translate it, put it up in subtitles. But we generically knew that the probe was just like, hey, you guys doing okay? Yeah, we're here now. We're good. Okay, we're leaving. Like, that was it.
But it felt
The ocean seems
longer it felt long, like over long. Like if there wasn't subtitles and we're just getting like a really long time, and this is supposed to essentially be the climax of the movie. I don't know. They could have cut it a little bit, I
That's
think.
A little bit, but compared to the Wookiee stuff, yeah, no, it's not even a comparison. There's like maybe a minute of the whale song stuff. And you weren't wrong when you wrote this. I think it is like 11 or 15 minutes of just talking Wookiee where you don't hear English. And it does get ridiculous and
Yeah,
repetitive. And like,
it's solid 11 minutes. Solid 11 minutes. And the Papa Wookiee is watching Wookiee P word. Weird.
well, that whole thing is weird.
I was just gonna compare it to the ship P word from the motion picture, which is worse. Definitely, still the motion pictures ship spin around for 6 minutes.
What do you think of the whale probe compared to V'ger though?
Ooh. As far as like an entity, I love hating on the motion picture, but I will take V'ger just as an entity over like the design of the whale probe for sure. Because I've always felt like the whale probe is just it's like a big hollow oil drum, and then what I do like is this weird like eye looking thing when you look at the ball from the bottom. Other than that, it's really cheesy.
I like that it looks nothing like any spaceship we have seen so far. And I also it looks like it could transport whales. That's why they have this big tank. And so to me, it was like, I liked that it looked like nothing that they would recognize. It doesn't look anything like a starship that they've come across.
Yeah, like it looks in the strictest sense of the word alien, like entirely. There's no communicating with it. There's nothing that you can sort of relate to. And I think that's what makes this decoding and adventure so impactful. It's like trying to crack something so alien.
And yet it comes from Earth. Like the key of it.
Well, from like species like the whales, I would really like a follow-up as to where the probe came from. Even if it turns out that like I think it would be cool if it turned out a lot like season 2 of Prodigy, where like the kids of the protostar actually set themselves in motion and the whole thing. And you find out that like George and Gracie are super intelligent, and then they go on to like do like a station ops thing, and they design some stuff, and they go forward in the future, and then they end up sending the probe back.
I bet there's an explanation in the novel, but the only part I remember is that scene right there.
You know what this random dude.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any other questions or stuff they wanted to get off their chest about this one?
I liked the graphics and the faces morphing scene. I think it stands up. It doesn't look like old tech to me.
For early CGI?
Yeah,
and
it doesn't
I
look like old tech to me.
I had never noticed it, but I really like how McCoy becomes Spock.
Yeah.
And like as like a thing from like 3. I thought that was a nice touch.
What did we think of the time warp scene where it was like, yeah. There was a lot of abstract things kind of visually going on there.
I think it's just a ridiculous explanation for time travel, but this is a movie for a ridiculous explanation of time travel.
I mean, they had already established it in TOS, and they definitely weren't thinking about it too much on a science level then. They might have by the time they got to this movie, but like, all right, well, it's already established in canon. We can do it. Great.
Back then, they were just doing it for fun. Now they're doing it for a purpose. So.
Like I seem to recall like a man like splashing as they decelerated
Oh
when
yeah,
they landed on Earth. That part was like really weird,
like a
just
mannequin just went
visually,
like,
and just
yeah.
set it apart from the rest of the movie. And I was like, whoa, where did that come from?
Kind of felt like that. Yeah, they just took a film student and they're like, we need a time travel scene, so go film something.
The most beautiful
Anyone
thing
else?
I've ever seen.
Oh, sorry. Anyone else think it was an odd directorial touch on Nimoy's part that both of these movies that he directed contained footage taken from the movie before it?
No, I think it's just a matter of like sewing things together, making sure that everything feels like one breathable universe.
I always just see it as a matter
Sure.
of budget.
Yeah, that too.
I
It's not the
never
most egregious.
this movie in particular, I don't really necessarily think you need to know what happened in the last one
That's
because
true.
it's just sort of returning the crew to status quo. And yeah, there is that scene where they're facing consequences for having stolen the ship and the things that happen in the previous movie, but I think that scene explains what happened in the last movie just fine.
That's true.
We also needed a little bit of remembrance so that we know about Savik's baby that's on the way, right?
Yeah. I think we basically exhausted that point last week about like how in this one you've got Savik standing next to Spock's mom when they leave Vulcan to signify that like she might be pregnant, even though that storyline didn't actually go anywhere.
I still say they should have like introduced a whole new actress, in her first major movie role as Savick. Just a running
just
joke
some-
through all three movies.
It's like there's something about the TOS crew and being deadbeat fathers, I swear, or inadvertent deadbeat fathers.
No, there's father problems all over Star Trek.
Yeah, it's not just TOS.
Yeah.
A lot in TNG. During this scene, though, I just wanted to throw. Does anybody else get the feeling that this Klingon is like playing the role of God? Why have I lost his name? Soviet premier. Either way, like
At the time?
it's some kind of
Gorbachev.
Soviet ambassador at the yeah,
Gorbachev?
no,
No,
not Gorbachev,
Gorbachev?
but
Further back,
Khrushchev.
Khrushchev.
Khrushchev at the UN. Like there was a couple of famous times where he went there and like just kind of like made a big thing, and there have also been times when Soviet ambassadors have done the same kind of thing where they're like they're playing the victim, but truly they want the same thing against their adversaries, and it's like it's real theatrical crap.
Was that in Russia, Scott? I don't think so.
I think it was Khrushchev that was banging his shoe on a podium.
Maybe.
could
I
be
think
wrong.
you're right.
Maybe. Yeah.
Anyway,
I was confusing that with the throwing the shoe.
So many
we have a
shoes. involved.
minute and a half. If anybody wants to get a final question in before we do out of tens.
Oh, I was just wondering, like, how well adjusted do you think they were to the 80s? Like, they seemed
Clearly not.
You
right.
think they do some research or something
Yeah.
to be like, what's going on at the time? Like, what was San Francisco like? There's a lot of like, they have this information. It's
Mhm.
just convenient for the movie for them not to access it.
Yeah,
Well, they
it's
were not in a Federation ship. They were in a Klingon.
That's true. I keep
But-
forgetting about that.
But at least it's always Spock, though. None of the
Yeah.
humans know anything. It's always Spock. Oh, you used to have whales. Oh, your people used to experiment with nuclear fission.
For someone who denies he's half human, he knows a lot about humans.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm related to Sherlock Holmes. What?
Yeah, a
Yes.
lot of that is why my wife is like one of the only people I've met that doesn't really like this movie as a whole, because it's got too many discontinuities like within the 80s timeline, and there's so many times where like these characters should have been, arrested or something stupid happened to them because of the stuff that they do. I mean, I don't look at it. I look at it as a very lighthearted, fun movie. But
That's sort of the same appeal as like a Back to the Future. Like they're doing
Mhm.
stuff that's
Yes.
wildly outrageous, I guess, and not taking consequences.
all right, we have hit the 1 hour mark. It's time to move to the out of tens. I realized after doing last week's ranking, I should have given 3 a 6 instead of a 5.5. Because I know I hold the apocryphal stance that Section 31 is a 5. And I feel like The Voyage Home is just one better, and Search for Spock is just one better than that as a Trek movie. So this one, I guess I'm forced to give a 5.25. It's it's the measuring stick for Trek movies for me, because most of them are only okay. This is where you get from absolutely like mediocre or bad movies to like, well, hey, it's pretty good, and everything above this just kind of keeps getting better. So yeah, I'm at 5.25. It's a fun romp. Go ahead, Josh. Let's go around that way. Yeah.
Oh well, I was expecting to. So this is probably going to sway the other way, but I would probably give this an 8.5. Objectively, this is not the best Star Trek movie. Objectively, it's not the best story, but out of all of the original series Star Trek movies, this is my favorite. Is just one of the things I like to come to Star Trek for, I guess, is a comfort watch. Or like The Wrath of Khan or Undiscovered Country are like great pieces of work. This one is more of a, you can just toss it on and you don't need to sit down and worry over the consequences too much. You don't need to pay attention to a lot of the illusions going on or anything. It's just a fun time with characters you've come to know, and most of them actually get a chance to do something in this movie, whether or not it makes sense in like a logical sense or not. They get a fun time, fish out of water. We get a lot of I don't know, colorful metaphors, which I didn't remember it went on so much, and they were throwing damn in every other word or hell or whatever it was. But it's just
The
from
hell
start
you
to
are.
finish, there's not much of like a lull, I guess, either. So it's just kind of a nice, fun, fill your house on a Sunday afternoon or something movie to throw on and just enjoy the Star Trek world without being too concerned about, I don't know, horrible things.
All right, I'm gonna go just a little bit higher and give it a 9. It is not as good as Wrath of Khan, which I believe we all collectively said was 9.5. But I feel like the story works well enough. I mean, you get enough time travel in Trek as it is, and then they finally put it in a movie. I enjoy the performances. It's almost unexpectedly funny in cases, and I do love you have an interesting Star Trek movie that you can laugh at. I really like the fact, I've said this before, but like for a Star Trek movie, it is seriously stripped down, because you might have, the well-known Star Trek characters, but they're not on the Enterprise. They spend most of their time out of uniform. You don't see a lot of high-tech stuff, especially in the past, obviously. But what little they have, like, it makes it very clear that this is a Star Trek movie, and I like that. It loses points mostly because, I'm not anti-environment, but this was a very, very less than subtle environmental message. Not quite to the point of beating you over the head with it, but just like to the point where I'd be like, okay, yeah, we get it. You need to save the whales, and we need to save the environment, and you were trying to make that clear to everybody in the middle of the 80s. But otherwise, yeah, it's definitely up there on my list.
I would also give it about an 8. I think out of the Star Trek movies so far, Wrath of Khan is great and impactful, but I think there's something really special about it just being solidly entertaining all the way through. And it's fun. And I believe Dell mentioned that, this movie can kind of come kind of be like an intro to Star Trek in a way, where you don't necessarily have to know the backstory or the sort of deep sciencey nerd things that are attached to the ships and the timelines and all that stuff, all those details that like kind of live in our heads from having watched all this stuff. Like you don't need all that context in order to enjoy this movie. And I think that's really valuable. So there's some really good humorous moments. I think Scotty saying there be whales here was the hardest I've ever laughed at a Star Trek movie. So 8.
You're muted, Del.
There we go. You're not going to be surprised what I have to say, but I'm giving this a 9.5. I prefaced myself by saying this is one of my top 5 favorite movies, not Star Trek movies, but movies in general. The thing I like most about Star Trek is the times that it gets to breathe. Like I'm happy to go through like the thick plot and the thick science and technobabble, but the things that I like, the difference between this and being a Star Wars fan for me is that Star Trek can take a joke. And I think that's what this movie is Star Trek taking a joke, but also having a serious message at the core that was very timely when the movie came out. And it also kind of gives us this vision of thinking in the long term. I mean, right now, all of us are very aware that there are things not thinking in the long term, that we're all, that, you know what I mean? And I think this movie reminds us, as part of the environmental message, that part of that is thinking long term. But I also have a lot of nostalgia. I saw the movie in the theater. It was probably the first Star Trek movie I saw in a theater that I actually understood. I definitely became a punk because of that guy in the movie. Like I went out and shaved one side of my head and started listening to like different kinds of music than a little Christian girl did. But yeah, I mean, this movie to me means a lot. And that's why I made the extra effort to be here just to talk about it, because it makes me very happy. So yeah, 9.5.
And given that I'm so low on the totem pole, I want to make it clear that when I do rankings, I just rank versus each other. So like, I feel like this is the middle of the road. It's pretty good. Like if I was rating this as a movie versus other movies that weren't Star Trek, and I'm not just like putting the 13 movies, 14 movies somewhere between 1 and 10. Yeah, this is like a 7.5. It's pretty much everything you guys all said. It's a very fun, you can throw it on anytime. It's not super Star Trek-y. That's kind of what keeps it down as a Star Trek movie for me. But as a movie, yeah, it's just something you can throw on and it's just fun. Okay, so next week, we're going to find out what God needs with marshmallows. So, I'd like to thank all of you guys that joined me today to do this video, and for all of you that tuned in. So, until we see you again, live long.